We will now continue from where we left last video by working with yet another cell type called Markdown cells. Let's open a new cell, and this time we will use the plus toolbar button. Here I push plus, and I'll see a new cell being inserted right below the cell that was highlighted. We can now click on the cell and change the purpose of the cell from cell to a markdown by choosing markdown from the drop-down menu on the upper right corner of this notebook. So if we go here, push click on this code markdown, and instead of code, we pick markdown. So now this cell, when I click on it, it's a markdown cell, and it means we can write text in it instead of code. This is great for documenting your data analysis pipeline. So I can just say hi and run this, and I'll see there's a text there. So I can actually go on that cell again on the text and click on it and get back to that markdown cell mode. Although Markdown cell is a simple text markup designed with simplicity, like a word editor, you can do quite a bit of formatting and beautification as well as scientific editing using these Markdown cells. The Markdown cells have support for HTML and other text formatting languages like LaTeX, if you heard of that. For example, we can create bullet lists. When we actually say here, instead of hi, let's actually do it a little nicer. And then I'll go to the next line and I'll say star space. Everything I put after this bar space is rendered into a bulleted list. So I can say 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. To quote Dr. Seuss, when I run this and I say shift enter, it's going to create what I just typed into a bulleted list. So we can, instead of running code, we are now rendering HTML through this text markup cell. You can make many things with it, right? We could also create, for example, titles or headings. For that, we will use the hashtag symbol. So if we say hashtag, it already shows you this is heading 1. This is a markdown cell. And here, if we say 2 hashtags, it's going to make it a little smaller, so it's like a heading 2 in Word. It would be, this is heading 2. And if we go on and on like that, 3 of them will be heading 3 and onwards. So when I say shift enter now, I'll see these being rendered as I wanted to, which is title, headings, bullet lists, and text. So we can also do a bold text, bold-faced text. So I'll just say star star example text here. And if I say shift enter, it's gonna format it as bold. I can make things italics or emphasize things by using an italic font. I can say example text here. It already started editing it as italics or italics. And I see that it's emphasized that last line. Links like google.com, how do we do that? If you actually just put an HTTP, google.com here, it's going to already render it as an automatic link to google.com. So there are so many ways to render text, of course, and if you'd like to learn more, there's a Markdown guide we give you in a follow-up reading. Also, as a side note, most think of Markdowns as code commenting or documenting your code, but I think of it more like writing a scientific paper or a white paper. You can create very sophisticated editing with markdowns. For example, you can create equations using LaTeX equations. LaTeX is a document editing language which has a syntax for many text components for scientific writing, including writing equations. So let's go to that next cell, and maybe here I can show you. I'll switch that again from that code cell to a markdown cell, like this. And I'll enter there a LaTeX equation. So to write an equation in LaTeX, I need to write them between two dollar symbols, just like this. And there, I can just write my LaTeX equation, which we'll see how it gets rendered into an equation nicely formatted. Okay, let's render this line. As you see, in the cell, we entered a nice little LaTeX equation code. Even if it's a markdown cell, it's not a code cell, it knows how to render that into this beautiful equation. So here I can add more text, right? This is a bold LaTeX equation, and I can enter it. Now when I say Shift Enter, I'll see that it's nicely formatted, almost like you would see in a scientific paper. This is great when, for example, you're implementing code from a scientific paper or a data science algorithm that you'd like to try out. There's a lot of math involved in there. You can, of course, first write an elegant equation in LaTeX, easier to read for humans. Then you can implement that in a Python function, in a code cell right after that. It makes it a little easier to understand for your collaborators or readers. Next, we'll talk about how to use code cells for imaging in a notebook.